All right, folks, we are live with our first ever in-person side-by-side, immediate reaction to the 24-3 beatdown that Duke put on us. And honestly, it's hard to come up with words right now. I'm I'm struggling a bit because this was a game in which the Pack lost to an opponent that completed 4 passes. This was a game in which the lowest scoring team in the ACC is averaging 22.3 points per game. Our defense allowed 24, and we lost by 3 touchdowns. This is a game where our receivers had more drops than explosive plays. Especially, and watch this one, if you take away the name Kevin Concepcion and you also take away any completions that were behind the line of scrimmage, we had more drops than we did receptions in this game through the first half of the fourth quarter. It's tough. It's tough to come up with words for a game like this, especially because it felt like we were always on the brink of getting back into it up until about the 9-minute mark. That's the worst part of this thing. That's the part that is disheartening. That's the part that is infuriating. That's the part that it leaves you numb a little bit,
to say the least.
I think that that's a good fit. Because I mean, some people will talk about the big plays allowed. Even if we take away the 2 big plays, right? Because fun fact about this game, more than half of all of Duke's offensive production came on the double move and the 83-yarder by Waters. Now, Grayson and I have talked ad nauseum about allowing big plays this season. We've talked about it. We've talked about how it can't happen. It continues to be a problem that plagues this defense and all that good stuff. However, outside of those 2 plays, virtually nothing. And getting a turnover that put us in plus territory to the point where we did not gain another. The only 3 points that we scored today were a result of that turnover. If I am Robert and nobody's spot is safe. Nobody. I'm not. We don't have a wide receiver rotation. We don't have a tight end rotation. We don't have a running back rotation. Heck, I'll even go as far as to say that the only position that I'm saying we gonna rock out with you regardless is MJ Morris, because I feel like he played well enough and he needs to learn certain things, and we'll get into that later. But all in all, this game just leaves me kind of empty and numb. And I'm gonna pass the mic to you now, because I don't know how many more times I can say that. It's not even anger. It's just a feeling of, did that really happen? So I'm going to let you take it.
I'm going to try my best not to have a bit of a forked tongue here, because I'm still hung up on taking a deep shot on fourth and 3 with 9 minutes left in the game.
Yeah.
Effectively waving the white flag with 3/4 of a whole quarter left to play. And I understand the issue started far before that happened. The urgency on that last drive, no idea. No idea. I believe the words I used in the tweet was, the lack of situational awareness here is staggering.
Yeah.
And you could say that about the majority of the evening. It was not just the fourth quarter. It felt like we played almost like borderline scared after our first couple of drives offensively. We dropped some passes. We had some brutal pre-snap penalties, and it looked like we just kind of crawled back up in our turtle shell and said, well, tonight's not our night.
Yeah.
We came out, we tried, we are now all out of ideas. This is the best we can do.
Yeah.
And that is so disheartening on the road against a crosstown rival who we made look far, far better than they are. Now, credit to Duke's defense. They are a good defense. We made them look like the 85 Bears tonight. The drops killed us. Some of the play calling was a bit unimaginative, but that happens when you don't catch the football.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of get into this thing. It's going to be more or less the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sorry to spoiler alert. There's not a whole lot of good, but we're also going to be paying attention to a lot of these comments on here. I see you guys pouring in here. We will touch on some of these. Our first comment here I want to talk about actually comes on Twitter from ACC State fan. He's asking Kenton and myself, give me something to be hopeful about, anything. Tell me why I should think we have a chance in our remaining games. Something to be hopeful about. I think we have a bye next weekend. You can't lose on a bye week, or at least you hope not. So that gives us time to get back in the lab, watch all of the tape from what we just saw. I'd say probably the last 3 or so weeks.
Yeah.
And truly start to question, what kind of season do y'all want to have?
Yeah.
We're now 4-3. You're at the midpoint of the season. You've had some good, a lot of mid, and some bad. Who is this team? The rest of the season will tell you. If you want to call it a season here, you're going to lose fan support. You're going to lose the locker room.
You're going to lose some recruits.
You're going to lose some recruits. What kind of season do we want to have here? I think that's the question. I'll throw the mic back here, and then we'll get into some of these comments.
You know, if you're looking for something to be hopeful about, and I mean this very genuinely, look at MJ Morris's performance. He threw one absolute gimme, and he threw another pass that leaves you scratching your head and saying, like, hey, you know, that one was an easily interceptable ball thrown underneath, which I complained about with Brennan Armstrong, and I've complained about it with MJ too. But aside from that, he did a lot of good things. The deep ball to Anthony Smith, sure, it would have called for an amazing catch. It was there. A lot of passes, you know, you don't get 5, 6, 7 drops if your quarterback is not accurate. That's, you know, and again, I hate to say that. I hate to use that as a positive, like, hey, we had so many drops because they were hitting guys in the hands. But that's the reality. That's the reality. And I'll say this. Another positive is, another thing to be hopeful about is the same thing that we said about Brennan Armstrong can be said about multiple players. When we said he's not playable anymore after Louisville, there are multiple players that were getting big playing time on this offense that were, you know, supposed to be the guy on this offense that you cannot play anymore. You can't. With all due respect, how do you continue to drag out Keon Lassay? With all due respect. It's the young man is an upstanding young man. I've heard nothing but good things about him as a person. I've heard nothing but good things about him as a leader, as a locker room guy, as all those things. However, as a player, it seems that the lights get a little too bright on game day. Even the one big third down conversion that we did get out of him, it was almost a drop. It was a double catch situation where he was open. MJ threw the ball to where you had to sink to catch it, so it's not a hospital ball for you, bro. And so, with all due respect, and the connection between MJ and Casey is another thing that you can be hopeful about. And I'll throw in one last thing. Outside of what we saw in terms of those two busts, because we've talked about this with this defense ad nauseum, the big plays that you give up, that's going to kill us every time. Outside of those, look at what this defense did. If you take away those two big plays, right, you take 14 points off the board. This game is 10-3. This game is 10-3 if you just take away those two big plays. Because Beelan completed how many passes, Grayson?
4.
Of how many attempts?
12.
So we held their quarterback to 33%. They said that Jordan Waters had an amazing game. He had 123 yards on how many carries?
13.
Okay, so we take away the 83-yarder. We got 12 carries for 40 yards?
40.
That's less than 4 yards a carry.
I'll do the math for you.
It's about 3.5. It's about because 3.5 puts you at 36, 42. So yeah, he's a little under 3.5, 3.3 yards per carry outside of the 80 some odd yarder. So there are things to be excited about. There are, but the problem is the things that are to be excited about also come with so many things to worry about. Big Belton, supposed to be a first rounder, supposed to be a guy that had first round potential. Brother, you're dropping money left and right. And again, I'm not calling players out by name because I don't like these guys or because I have some personal vendetta. I wish if you're a Dragon Tales fan, if you grew up on that show like me and Grayson probably did, I wish with all my might that these players gave us something that I can say, Belton has been a stonewall over there. He's given up nothing. The odd thing about it, the only game he looked good was Notre Dame. That's it. That and VMI, of course, but I mean, even in the VMI game, that's FCS team. Against UConn, it was rough. Against this game, holding call, false start calls, all those types of things. And so even the moments where you say there's hope, there is also a lot of questions about, what are we doing at some point? So, we got to pay some bills, and I got to make sure that this motion sensor doesn't cut the lights off on us in here. But we'll be right back with the good, the bad, and the ugly after Grayson takes care of that for us.
Our first live ad read is for LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the best access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. They use simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on just the right candidates, the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. We're now going to transition into the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I purposely left this comment over here by Sarah Kate Ferguson because the good, really all I have to say about good is Kevin Concepcion. And I also tweeted this during the game. Robert and I believe it was on Tuesday, said there's an open invitation for other players not named Kevin Concepcion to show up on this offense. Be relevant when your number is called.
Yeah.
And nobody showed up to the party except for Kevin Concepcion. Yeah. That continues to be a problem. And I think probably it had the biggest spotlight on it tonight, other than recent games. And the run game, non-existent. Kevin Concepcion, for almost the entire game, was our leading rusher.
Yeah.
That can't happen.
Yeah.
I made a joke that he might need to be Deebo Samuel. If he is Deebo Samuel, that's a problem. Because that shows that we have zero capability outside of Concepcion.
And he's not built for it.
No.
He's not, with all due respect. Deebo Samuel is a short, stocky guy. Kevin Concepcion is more thin and wiry, and he's more in a Dante Hall type of frame of reference. For those of you who watched the Chiefs back in the day, if you think of a slot receiver, he's not built like a Steve Smith. That's like a short but big guy that can take that type of deal. That's not it. I'm going to tell you so I got a few goods here, and obviously Kevin Concepcion is on my list of goods. MJ, except for those few passes that I talked about, because again, like I said before, I'm okay with the young guy having some passes that concern me because he's a second-year guy, second-year starter, first ever road game starting. And another good that I'm going to throw on here is you all. You all. You're the good. You're the good. Let me make no bones about this, right? The fans pack this thing out. And I promise you, I'm saying this before I saw this in the comments. NC State fans, Wolfpack Nation, y'all have continued to show up. Y'all have continued. And somebody asked me, another podcast host, I won't say who, asked me, you know, you guys are kind of like really kind to some people who are upset with the coaches and the players and all that. And even when people have bad takes, you still give them the space to have it. Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, Wolfpack Nation, for all of the things that we hear and see and all the good takes, the bad takes, etc., y'all show up. It would be different. Grayson and I would be much less apt to give you all the space and platform that we do if y'all did not show up the way that y'all do, if y'all did not give to this program the way that y'all do, if y'all did not invest in this program in not just financially, but I mean the passion that Wolfpack Nation brings, it's unmatched. It's unmatched. And so with that being said, I would have to say that the fans showing up was a good. And my last good, outside of those two plays, the two plays that were accounted for over half of Duke's yardage, the defense allowed, what was it, 150 yards?
Just about, yeah.
150 yards. I don't think y'all understand. If we cut both of those plays in half, this is not a good game for the defense. This is an outstanding game for the defense. And I'm not making up for that. I'm not making up. I'm not saying, oh, the two busts don't matter, because we're going to get to that later. But you've got to be excited about the fact that not only does our defense have talent, they have leadership. You see Peyton Wilson is a leader in all things. You see Aiden White is a leader in that secondary in all things. When things go wrong, when things go right, Aiden White is always there. And I challenge you, if you're at the games, watch how Aiden White interacts with the rest of the DBs. Whenever somebody gives up a big play, whenever somebody gets an interception, watch 3. I did it last game. I did it this game. And I noticed he's always the first guy, always one of the first guys in his teammates' face to either pick them up, to pat him on the helmet and say it's okay, or chew him out. But he's always the first guy there. And so with that being said, those are the good things that I saw, but the bad and ugly, extensively more.
And real quick before we jump over there, I want to finish here on a good note, because I also want to talk about this NC State fan base. The comparison of NC State fans in this crowd tonight to Duke fans, Duke football should feel a tiny bit embarrassed by the way that their fans showed out tonight.
Yeah.
And conversely, NC State deserves far better because of the support that showed up here in Durham. And this is exactly what Peyton Wilson said in the post game. He said, I just want to apologize to Wolfpack Nation. That's not what they deserve. He said that this is a team that needs to get with the program. And that's coming from the best player on the field, who certainly does not need to apologize, because we have nothing but compliments to shower Peyton Wilson with.
Absolutely.
But he gets it. He gets it. This fan base, and regardless of season, the folks that are come out and say 11 years, I understand that too. But just in a vacuum here tonight, so much red, not much blue, and the seats were blue, and I still saw more red. And that was the effort we gave on the road. It's what else is there to say, really? So we'll transition now into the bad before we get into the ugly. We close out the show here. Kenton, you have a couple points you want to start with?
Absolutely. So the first bad, and I know some of y'all are going to say this should be in the ugly, but MJ Morris's body language when things weren't going right, when there were drops and all that, and it's not, and this is not to, again, denigrate him as a player. This isn't to cast doubt on him as a player or speak negatively of him as a player. This is something that needs to be coached into him, because it's not, I tell people all the time, it's not, these aren't things that are innate to players. It's not. We're not coaching good habits into MJ in terms of, hey man, when your wide receiver drops a pass, keep the offense rolling. Keep Keep everybody's spirits. Keep it up. Hey, don't, when we're not getting a call, brother, you play for NC State. Never look for a call. Never. Y'all all know I'm a Lions fan. The thing I love most about Dan Campbell, I've never once heard that man blame a ref, say, hey, the refs aren't on our side, whatever the case may be. He knows you're a Lion. You're going to get shafted. The refs will do everything they can to snatch it from you. We need to instill the same thing in our quarterback, which, again, he's a young guy. He's a sophomore. I'm not blaming him for not knowing this or not being this way. It needs to be coached into him to say, hey, this is who we are. This is where we are in the world. This is how we'll be treated by the referees. Of course, the DPI on Shaheem Battle on an uncatchable ball, that was terrible. And then to not get a DPI on Blades on a play that was much worse, because that ball not only was catchable, but it hit Blades in the back while Anthony Smith fought back to it. I mean, yeah, that's a thing. Absolutely. Timmons being pushed while the ball was in the air. Yeah, that's a thing. Brother, you play for NC State. You've got to understand that's going to happen. And tell your guys when y'all get back to them, you see how they feel about us. Let's get it rolling. Let's show them you can't snatch this away from us even if you tried. And the last bad is Duke's late timeout and NC State's late timeout subsequently after that. David Dorn, what are you doing? I don't know why Duke called that timeout.
I know.
Part of me feels like it was a moment to rub it in and say, hey, we're up 24-3 and like we want to keep the end zone clean and make sure that they don't get in our end zone or whatever the case may be. Sure, whatever. But with that being said, why would you then call a timeout after that when you weren't calling timeouts before that and there was no sense of urgency before that and we got a minute left? I'm the type of person that I am a eternal optimist to the max. I joked around with Grayson, and hand on the Bible now, Grayson, did I or did I not say, wouldn't it be crazy if we scored, got an onside kick, scored again, got another onside kick, and scored again to tie this thing up with like a minute 15 left?
Yeah.
But you know what goes into that? A determination to do it. A determination to say, we're going to hurry up. Because even if we do score right here, we're still going to need to drive, even if we recover an onside kick, drive another 50, 60? Chances are we aren't going to get that in one play. And then, even if we do score, we got to do it again. There was no urgency to do that. And then after Elko takes his timeout to rub it in, you call a timeout too? Are you also trying to rub it in on your players or something? What are you doing? What are we doing? If you didn't have the urgency and you waved the white flag before that, what was the point of calling a timeout at that point? So, those are the bad, and the ugly is the longest category because there is a lot to be said for ugly.
Yeah, so bad. I don't even have any bad because all of mine fall in ugly. That's how many points we have to make here in the next 15, 20 minutes, however long we stretch this thing out. I'll start with my ugly, and I kind of started this whole episode in talking about this. The mental aspect from the coaches, the players, the entire staff was absent most of the night. And it felt like that began almost in that first quarter. We made some mental mistakes, dropped some very catchable balls, and it looked like we tucked our tails from there on out. The body language we talked about was bad all night long.
Yeah.
And from that, the play calling got unimaginative. The execution went strictly downhill. The amount of drop passes, like Kenton mentioned it in the opening here, we had more drop passes than we did explosive plays.
More drops than explosive plays.
You could basically circle that and say that's the ball game right there.
Yeah.
Not to mention Duke throwing one pass in the second half. One.
Mind you, we're not saying completed one pass, attempted one.
They attempted one pass.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to. They had built a lead, and NC State's offense was playing so uninspired that they felt confident enough to squat on that lead and then watch us trip over ourselves for the remainder of the second half.
Yeah.
Mentally, we were not there. It looked like we didn't get off the bus tonight. Actually, I take that back. It looked like we got off the bus for the first 2.5, 3 minutes. I love the first defensive series. We pressured Beelan into forcing a turnover. We converted that into points. And then that is effectively where our night ended. Next, ugly. Everyone not named MJ Morris or KC Concepcion on offense. Everyone. The offensive line, Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
The wide receiving group, a lot of them had brick hands tonight. In big spots, too. Not just a play that would have gone for 4 or 5. We're talking about plays that would have gone for first downs. We're talking about catching a pass that could have drastically changed the outcome of this game because it would have continued to drive. Mm-hmm. That's how monumental these mistakes we saw were tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And next, ugly. Where do I want to go with this? I would say, I don't know. It's funny, this defense, we've mentioned this too. The majority of Duke's night came on 2 plays. It was the long run play and it was the long pass play. Outside of that, defense played a pretty good game. We had some costly penalties, nothing too crazy. But it's like, when you put yourself in a hole like this, and the blame goes all over the place. And I think a lot of this both comes from coaching, it comes from lack of execution, and it comes from focus. Yeah. But I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. There's only so many times you can look to your defense and say, we're struggling here. We need y'all to do something for us to keep us in this ball game. Mm-hmm. And against a team like Duke, ain't gonna happen. I'll flip it over here.
And let me come off and piggyback off that with this, right? I disagree about the penalties not being ugly because let me tell you why. The 2 longest sustained drives by Duke. Now, granted, we know how the touchdowns came, right? We know that the touchdowns for the most part were very quick strike situations. However, let's look at the totality of their longest drives. Both of their longest drives had automatic first downs granted to them by NC State on penalties. Now, were all the penalties that I would agree with? No, not necessarily. But there were also some just idiotic penalties. Savion Jackson, why are you pushing this young man's head into the ground? Granted, I think it was unsportsmanlike conduct instead of roughing the passer as they called it. But either way, you play for NC State. Do not give the refs a chance, period. These are ACC officials we're talking about. If you give them a chance, they'll make sure that they don't, they'll make sure that they snatch it away from you. My biggest ugly of this game that I walk away with, shaking my head and what left me with this empty feeling, we have no offensive tone setter.
Nothing.
We have nobody who is the person. And don't get me wrong, leaders come in all shapes, forms, and fashions, all that good stuff. Who would you say is the heart and soul of this offense? Not the best player, because we all know the best player is KC by a mile. There's not any world in which anybody's arguing anybody but KC is the best player on this offense. Sure. Why or not why? Who would you say is the guy that you would say that's probably the player that breaks them down in practice every day? That's probably the guy that shows up first, leaves last, and you can tell in everything he does that he's that guy. Who would y'all say that is? I'd love to see y'all comment who you think that is on offense. Because the offensive line, I haven't seen anybody set any tone. With all due respect, I just haven't. McMahon is the guy that I would expect to be, and I haven't seen it from him. In the backfield, I haven't seen the guy.
I can tell you who it needs to be.
And listen, at the end of the day, that's the thing about it, right? Like, we look at the heart and soul guys, and it's not often the best player.
Yeah.
If you talk about, different football teams in the past, right? Mike Singletary was probably that guy for the 85 Bears,
right.
Speaking of him, right?
Right.
Was he the best player on that team?
No.
But Walter Payton was on that team.
Yeah.
But he was the guy that you're like, that's the one that if you take him out, you've taken their heart and soul.
That's right.
Now, granted, sometimes it does align, but sometimes it doesn't in terms of it being the best player. And we just offensively, we don't have the guy. Defensively, we all know who the guys are.
That's right.
We can tell immediately. We have one on every level. You can see Davin Vann, CJ Clark. Every time something happens with the D-line, they're right there. Are they not? We can see with the linebackers, Peyton Wilson is the guy. We can see Aiden White is the guy. There's no question. There's no question. Poogie Kennedy's probably having the best season out of all of the DBs. And yet we all know Aiden White is the guy. That's the heart and soul guy.
Right.
Who's that guy on any of these offensive groups? On any of these offensive units? That's the problem that I look at here, and I'm the most concerned with. And the last thing that I'll say is an ugly. What have our tight ends done to Robert and I? What have they done? When he was at Virginia, he used the tight ends extensively.
Syracuse too, just last year.
Syracuse, he used the tight ends extensively. Does Juice Vereen not know the playbook or something? Does Chris Tootle just refuse to block as well? Does he? Because I saw Porter Rooks in the game at multiple points when I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not in the locker room. Of course, I have my sources, my people that I hear from, and they tell me, hey, this is what's going on, and this player ain't playing for this reason or that reason. Of course. But I have not heard any explanations good enough to explain away any of those things. Any of those things. And let me take this a step further. The people who are supposed to stir the drink and set the tone on offense are not only underperforming, they're becoming net negatives a little bit.
Big time.
Belton becoming a net negative. You're supposed to be a drink stirrer, brother. What are we doing here? McMahon, huge holding penalty late in the game. You're supposed to be a drink stirrer, brother. We look at the rest of the group. Keon Lassane, you're supposed to be a drink stirrer. You're the captain. For the coin tosses, you're the guy out there. And yet, what do we get? How many yards after catch did he have in this game? What was it, like 8 or 9, something along those lines? Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? 15 yards after the catch. On how many targets? 7? 8? 7 targets, 15 yards after catch. And a fumble in there as well. What are we doing here? What are we doing? To me, the only position group that can say that they've had multiple games of standing out offensively. Multiple games. Because in the Notre Dame game, nobody can argue that Juice Vereen wasn't one of our 3 best players on the team.
Yeah. Haven't seen him since.
Against Marshall, nobody could argue that Trent Penix wasn't one of the 3 best players on the team.
Yep.
Can you say that there are 3 games where our quarterbacks were the best players on the team?
No.
Running backs?
Maybe last week, but still no.
Wide receivers?
KC.
But have we had 3 games where the wide receiver group, not just KC, but the wide receiver
group as a whole? No.
Okay.
No.
All right. And offensive line?
No. Certainly not.
Okay. So with that being said, we lacked urgency on offense. We don't have leadership. And here we are looking at this thing and saying to ourselves, oh, hey, everything's fine here. This is okay. No, absolutely not. This thing, Robert and I needs to look at his offense, tear it down to the studs, and build it back up. Because the alternative is trying to patch up something like this. This offense doesn't need a reform. This thing needs a rebuild in terms of what we're looking at offensively. And Dave Doran had a quote from the post-game presser. They outplayed us and they outcoached us. Wasn't good enough.
You don't say.
Again, I'm going to just say this. Tony Gibson, you have some mistakes to clean up. You have those big plays that have been plaguing this defense. They need to be cut out. But in the ACC, in Power 5 football, if you allow 24 points, you put your team in a position to win that ball game. Yep. I'm not saying that guarantees you'll win, because there are going to be some games possibly where your offense puts up 20 or so. And you would hope that wouldn't happen. But I said this game was going to be a race to what, 21?
21.
Dude put up 24.
We didn't even put our shoes on. We didn't even attempt a race.
So, and that's the thing about it. That's the thing about it. So, in conclusion, I'm walking away from this game kind of numb. And this offense needs some full-scale changes because Anthony Smith needs to be in for more than just go routes. And the tight ends need to be utilized extensively. And the last thing I'll say is this. If Doran keeps at it with what he is doing right now, not only should we if Doran keeps at what he's doing right now, not only will he lose the locker room and all that, but he'll lose a massive amount of fan support. And fans will stop booing, which is what happened to Keats at one point. Let's just be honest. Fans stopped booing. They stopped showing up. And he had to put out a product that was winning, that was good enough, that was worthy of fans showing up. And then all of a sudden, folks start coming. And you and I both saw it. We went to basketball games last year in the beginning of the season. And then when we started winning, when DJ Burns is putting up 35 on folks, and all of a sudden, things were different. Things were different. When Jarkel Jordan is cooking the way he was cooking, things got different. Dave Doran is very close to that space of losing fans' attention and care.
Undeniably so.
And that's the worst space ever to be in. That's the worst space ever to be in.
Undeniably so. And I saw a lot of comments about this feels like the end of Tom O'Brien's tenure. Who am I to disagree? From what I saw this evening, who am I to disagree? I've seen a lot of comments about Chuck Amato, Chuck the Chest in here. I won't take it that far. But who am I to disagree? And Kenton just nailed it here. That you can feel the chair getting warmer here. After a performance like this in year 11, it's getting warm.
Yes. And apathy is definitely the word that I was looking for, Cam. You are definitely correct. Apathy is, it's the worst thing in the world because for fans, fan is short for fanatic. I say that all the time, and I mean that. For most people, in terms of most things, if we're talking about general life, when we talk about like, oh, how much do you care about this issue or that issue or this issue? Apathy is easy because you have to like actually be actively involved and try to solve most problems. If you are a fan, you are a fanatic of your team. You are a person that follows that team in depth. And when you get apathy out of them, and I'm going to tell you this, okay? I saw somebody in here saying, hey, that makes folks bad fans. I'll tell you this. I'm not mad at people who say, I have done everything I can as a fan. I've donated, I've showed up, I've given, I've driven on to the road games. I've done all the things. And in return, I was given 3 points. I don't know if I want to do this, partake in this anymore. Listen, I know Wolfpack Nation, y'all still will show out, and you should show out. You should show out because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Coach Doran, right? This is about a guy like Peyton Wilson, who I told did this team a solid. Did this team a super solid. Y'all have seen before Grayson was on this show, I had a draft analyst on the show who said, hey, Peyton Wilson is a first-round talent. All he needs to do is prove that he can stay healthy. If he can't stay healthy, the draft experts will know where he is, regardless of what he does this season. If he can, great, he'll be a first-rounder. He couldn't stay healthy, and so it's known what he is. He's a known commodity. Nobody's moving him up or down the board based on what he does this year, and yet he came back anyway. It's for guys like that you should be showing up. It's for guys who are doing what they're supposed to do, who are getting better every week, and for guys like Aiden White, who quietly is having a really good season in terms of teams avoiding them all together. And in the few moments where teams do throw his way, if it's not a miscommunication on the back end, if it's him and the receiver, mano a mano, he knows he has that guy, he's looked phenomenal. It's showing up for guys like that, and it's showing up with the hope that hope is a dangerous thing. Hope is a dangerous thing because it spreads like wildfire. We get this team going well, or we show up as the fans, we show up as the media, all that good stuff. The team gets to going well, and all of a sudden the team looks up and they say, wait a minute now. We've won 3-4 straight games, and the fans never gave up on us.
How about that?
We put up 3 points, outplayed, outcoached, 4 completions. 4 completions, all it took to beat us. And the fans kept showing up. So I'm never going to say, hey, fans, stop showing up. I will say I understand. I'll say this.
The bad fans are the ones that don't care at all. That's a bad fan. Yeah. If you're a fan of this team, you should be pissed off right now. Kenton and I are here because we care and we're pissed off. That's why we're on here. We were pissed off. You should be pissed off. That effort felt like a game from 2019, a season that a lot of us don't like to consider existed because of how bad it was. That effort, it should make you mad. You should be upset because it means you care. It means you're a fan. And this team deserves this fan base deserves far better from what we got tonight. The effort was not there. The attitude was not there. And if that continues and you got Clemson next, good luck. Good luck. I can assure you this. You think Dabo Swinney would love nothing more than to roll into Raleigh 2 weeks from now and completely break the spirit of this program. Think about that for a second. What kind of season do you want to have? I said it about 20 minutes ago. What kind of season do we want to have? That's where we are right now. We're 4-3. We still have a bowl to play for, if that matters to some folks. Some folks don't care. I get it. We want more than that. We're tired of just making a bowl. We want to play for something. Yeah. We want to play for something. I get that. But if you call it quits now, who knows where the season goes? You lose the locker room. You lose recruits. You lose maybe even current guys on the team. Players could quit here. Say, I've had enough of this here in Raleigh. I'll take my talents elsewhere. Yeah. Yeah. This bye week, for better or worse, it feels like worse, is coming at a very good time for this team. Because the effort we saw tonight, that can very quickly snowball on you. This is a loss that turns one loss into 2 losses, into 3 losses, and so on and so forth. Awful. So that about summarize the ugly. I guess we could put it that way. I got another bill to pay here with our friends over at FanDuel, and then we will give our final thoughts here, and then we will get out of here as I see it is past midnight now. We appreciate so many of you staying up with us, getting some thoughts off your chest. I know you guys have had a lot to say. We got a lot to say. Game like that will do that to you. But our second sponsor of the day is FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get up to $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place just a $5 bet. I'm getting tired of reading this and not being able to bet in North Carolina, so I can't wait till January rolls around. But you can get up to $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Well, I guess we're past kickoff. Continue the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right. We're going to roll through these comments here. Couple more to talk about before we get out of here. Again, I know it's late. I also want to reiterate something. Because NC State football is on a bye week next week, we will be ramping up our basketball coverage as we are now under a month away. A lot to talk about on the basketball court. So if you've been waiting for coverage there, it is on the way. We've had a couple questions. Wanted to clear that up there. Now, let's see here. Let's pick out some comments.
And let me just get this off my chest while Grayson looks through the comments that he wants to get on screen there. Again, the fact that there was at one point 80 people in this thing. That's the type of stuff that we talk about. Past midnight. That's the type of stuff we talk about.
It's because we care.
It's because we care. That's the difference at NC State, and that's why, to be quite honest, I understand folks, being upset with the coaches and all that good stuff. I'm gonna tell you this. The reality of this thing is if I talked to Grayson about this during the game. If we're talking about recruiting for receivers, this is the perfect game. Because what receiver ain't looking at this receiving core and saying, "Oh, I can for sure come in and get some running here."
When Terquavion moved on from the program, we said we got a lot of shots for so here in Raleigh. We got a lot of receptions here right now. Take a look, watch some tape. Mm-hmm. If speaking to any wide receivers jumping in the portal, take a look at us.
Take a look.
We'll get you the ball.
We got a quarterback that can sling that thing and get it to you. We got a quarterback that can get it to you. And as you saw with what we did with KC tonight, we'll utilize you in however we can. If you balling.
Multi-purpose.
But I very seriously want to kind of leave it with this in terms of my final thought on this thing. This game was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment. And it isn't just an embarrassment to the coaches. It's an embarrassment in terms of the fans packed this thing out.
Yeah.
What more can you ask of the fans? There's a reason Grayson and I haven't said anything about, hey, fan support needs to continue. It needs to increase. It needs to.
It was there.
What more can you ask of the fans?
maybe a couple of us throw on some pads and catch some passes tonight for MJ. Maybe that.
Listen, my eligibility is up.
I think I'm fresh out too.
I can't go out there and block nobody. I didn't play offensive line even when I did play. So I'm not going out there to block nobody. Grayson's a little thin, a little wispy. I don't think he's going out there to block nobody.
I'll run the slot.
And so we're at that point where, again, it's one of those things where Wolfpack Nation deserves better. The players on this team deserve better. The defense deserves better than what we got offensively tonight. Because let's be honest, while some people will look at 24-3 and think in terms of NFL, like, oh man, that's kind of bad. If you look at a 24-3 in college, honestly and truly, I'm asking you, what under God's green earth were you doing offensively? What under God's green earth are you doing offensively? And so after this game, like I said, Robert and I tear it down to the studs. Nobody's position is safe except MJ. And even with MJ, actually, I'm going to just tell you, that body language has to get better because I can teach you how to read the defense. I can teach you what mistakes to look for and all that. We're not going to keep going for months and months and months. If I'm the coach, of course, not going to keep going for months and months and months saying, hey, brother, you got to get that together. You got to get that together. You got to keep your composure. And I'm not saying that he was mad at the players or anything like that. He might have been mad at the refs. Absolutely. He might have been mad at himself. Sure. Even when you're mad at yourself, you are the head of the body. The body goes as the head does. You've got to, hey, it's all right. Hey, that's on me, guys. That's on me. Let's get it back. Let's roll it again. So.
Yeah, real quick, I do see some comments in here. This one's talking about Jonathan Paylor here, of course. It seems like every game he's had is going for 5-6 touchdowns. Now, this, of course, is connected because of the news that we could see a potential flip from Terrell Anderson. He's been linked to Georgia. I believe he is going on an official visit in a couple weeks. I mean, I've seen some crystal balls. Anytime you have a team like Georgia come knocking on the door, it's going to be hard to deter that. Full stop. That will continue to play out. Whether you think he's going to go, whether you think he's going to stay, who's to say? Jonathan Paylor feels like much more of a certainty to me. Every comment I've seen from him is very reassuring. He goes out and produces. Again, he's a player that guys want to play with. And it really feels like all of the effort in re-recruiting him even will ultimately land him here. Terrell Anderson, I understand that'd be some disappointing news to be getting here. But keep this in mind. Like we just mentioned, we got a lot of receptions up for grabs here. And that's something you can market in the transfer portal. So you can lose Terrell Anderson. And sure, he's very, very, very highly touted. His rankings continue to go up. But I got to tell you, Kenton, I think I'd rather go after a guy that's already been in college for 2 to 3 years looking for a new home with that experience. Yeah. That could go further than a Terrell Anderson. I mean, a little bit of a silver lining. Ultimately, we want Terrell here because of what he could bring to the program. But it's just another element you got to account for in flip season. You lose a guy, okay, not the end of the world. That's what the transfer portal is now for. Yeah. And offensive line, that's going to be a major focus. Linebacker, that's going to be a major focus, in addition to wide receiving as well. But a couple more of these comments. I did see, I believe it was Christian Noonan. He wants to know about MJ Rice's situation. We will touch on this next week. A lot of questions surrounding that. Not sure if we'll provide much of an update, but we'll talk about it nonetheless. If anyone else has any questions, we'll hit it before we jump off here, but I understand it's late. Again, appreciate y'all so much for jumping in here. There's 62 of you still in here, and it's almost 1 a.m. That's how much Wolfpack Nation cares. Absolutely. That is a ringing endorsement to how much this fan base deserves in contradictory to what we saw tonight.
And even with us, 30-minute trip home from Durham at 1 a.m. in here talking with y'all.
And I would do it again tomorrow. As would
I, because this is, and fun. I'm not going to get into details, but long story short, there was a situation where, when I was upgraded to Locked On ACC, there was a question about whether or not I wanted to continue doing this show. And if you've ever seen the Wolf of Wall Street scene where he said, "I'm not leaving," it went something like that. It went something. I channeled my inner Jordan Belfort because, and this is, again, on everything I love, these were my exact words. I'm not leaving Wolfpack Nation with nothing. If y'all tell me I have to focus on one, let me find a replacement and then move on. But I'm not leaving Wolfpack Nation with nothing. Because, again, this is not a group that deserves to be left with nothing. And y'all are the reason that I was able to move up. Y'all are the reason. The fan support and all that they said, well, we're not sure if NC State can grow that type of, if you can organically grow that type of thing with NC State. And we did.
Still continuing
We're still
to grow.
growing.
Yeah.
And so, that's what it is. That's what we see it. And that's how we see it. And so, we'll always do this and we'll never give this up in terms of showing up for the Wolfpack and whatnot. And I'll say this, the realistic goals for the season now should be 6 to 7. 6 to 7 games is the ceiling for this team. I don't think that 8 is really realistic with what we're at now.
I'd go 7 is probably the ceiling.
I don't really see that with what we've seen offensively. And so, I will say this, though. The same thing I said about Louisville, I'll say about this team. I said about Louisville, they are 5 elite performances from Jack Plummer away from being a playoff team. Obviously, we saw today he did not have it in him. I'm going to bring this back to NC State and say we are 3 to 4 good, not great, not elite, not world-changing. We are 3 to 4 good performances from our offensive line away from being a totally different team.
A good performance would have kept us in that game tonight. Just good, not great, not spectacular, nothing special. Good would have kept us in that game tonight. That's how bad it was.
Yeah. So we're going to get on out of here now. But, thank y'all so very much for showing up. We appreciate y'all, and always go Pack.